another episode of G.E.N Talks podcast, where the goal is to empower the youth of Glendale and connect youth to community resources, individuals, and organizations through interviews and discussion. I'm your host, Melissa.
And I'm Desiree, and we had the pleasure of talking to Lauren Blackwood. Lauren is a Jamaican-American young adult author who currently lives in Virginia. She writes books heavily inspired by fiction, fantasy, heritage, and most importantly, romance. In the year 2021, Lauren published a New York Times bestseller book, best known as Within These Wicked Walls, a magical, spooky, nonetheless romantic fantasy novel so great it was even complimented by Britney Spears. Other than writing, Lauren is a great musician and enjoys playing the violin. We hope you enjoy this interview.
Thank you, Lauren, for taking the time out of your day to talk with us. We have a lot to discuss.
Thank you for having me.
So to start off the interview, I wanted to ask about your love for books and writing. How did that love blossom?
Well, it started in, I don't know what grade. It started as soon as I could read, basically. I've been reading. And, you know, the library's free in America anyway. So I spent all my time at the library. I would bring as many home. Like, I think you can check out like 20 books at a time. I would always do that. Because you never know which one you're going to love, which one, you know, you switch between books. So yeah, I've been doing that since I could read, basically. And then I discovered, oh, I can write my own stuff too. So basically, since like maybe fifth grade, I've been like trying to write stories.
Do you remember the moment when you decided that you wanted to pursue the author journey and become published?
I know it was in high school because I was writing like really seriously then. Well, not seriously to get an agent at that point, but yeah, in high school I was like, gosh, I have to like well, okay, I read a book called Hawk Song by Amelia Atwater Rhodes. And it's like a marriage of convenience sort of book, and like that trope is just right up my alley. So I was like, this book is perfect. Like, how do I duplicate this book like in my own writing? You know? So from then on, I was like, okay, this is the vibe I'm going for. So I think that's when I decided what sort of books I wanted to write. You know, before I was just like writing fun things, like being inspired by random things I saw maybe. But in high school, I sort of like changed gears and I'm like, okay, yeah, this is what I'm writing. And it's going to be like fantasy with like romance and like dark stuff. And I'm like, yes. So yeah, high school is when it started. But when I really started like sending to agents seriously was like sort of after college type of thing.
And what is something that you learned during your journey of becoming a published author?
Oh gosh, so many things. But I learned that like writing for publication is very different than writing for yourself. So both are fun, and both like you can learn from the craft either way. But writing for publication is like, especially for young adult, like they definitely go with like trends, and there's a certain word count you gotta hit, and like yeah, so it's a little more specific, and so like sometimes you can't be as free as you'd like to. I'm lucky because I got an awesome editor, Vicky Lane at Wednesday Books, and she sort of just lets me write whatever I want as long as like it makes sense, and like she'll do the editor thing, you know, but like I can put whatever I want in my books, which is very cool. Not everybody gets that freedom, so very lucky to have Vicky. But yeah, it is a little different the way you think about it because you have to think about, oh, I'm writing for these readers versus just yourself, you know.
Within These Wicked Walls was your debut novel. Can you tell us a little bit more about the inspiration behind it?
Oh, I love Within These Wicked Walls. Yeah, the inspiration came. I don't know which one came first because I was watching Jane Eyre, which I love. The one with Michael Fassbender, it was that version. So I love Jane Eyre. So I was just watching it casually on a random day, and I was thinking, like, it sort of is a haunted house, like sort of the vibes of a haunted house, but they don't go all the way, you know? So I was like, what if it was like an actual haunted house. Like that would be even better. So that romance plus an actual haunted house, I was like, I need to write that book. But it really didn't click until I came across the folklore of Ethiopia. And I kind of just randomly, sometimes when I'm bored, like I'm like, oh, folklore, I love that. What's cool stories can I find? You know, so I was like Google random things, and it came up, and I was like, wow, this is a very cool thing, and no one's really talking about it. And maybe no one was really talking about it because most of the information I found about it was um, like scholarly journals. So I'm like, okay, wow, no one really has access to this except for the people in Ethiopia. And I'm like, this is very cool. So at that point, I did a lot of research to make sure I was very respectful of the culture. Like that, one of the most important things to me is to be respectful when I do it. But I was like, this story has to be told, and this is the coolest thing ever. So it was the folklore of the evil eye. So I was like, okay, so now we have a castle that's cursed by the evil eye, and it's Jane Eyre, and this is the best thing I've ever heard. I need to write it. So that's how that came about.
And within these wicked walls is on the Reese's Book Club Fall 2021 YA pick and the New York Times bestsellers, and even Britney Spears has complimented the book. So what goes through your mind when you hear about these accomplishments or, when celebrities are raving about your book?
Oh gosh, it was crazy. I mean, like it's so surreal when it's happening. It's like, it's happening and you're like, wait a second, like somebody DM'd me about Brittany. I didn't see it like by myself. Someone DM'd me. You're like, Brittany's talking about your book. I'm like, wait a second. Like she had it on her Instagram and everything. And I mean, I found out about Reese like a few months before the book came out. So I had time to like scream about it and like be normal by the time the book came out. But yeah, it was crazy. It's very like I feel very like honored to get all this recognition because like I set out to write books because I wanted to be published, and just all this extra wonderful stuff is just like the cherry on top. I was like so excited. Like yeah, was doing a lot of screaming in my room, that's for sure.
And what about writing fantasy books do you enjoy the most? Like, what about fantasy drew you into it in the beginning?
Oh yes, fantasy's the best because I can make stuff up. Like I mean, it's so weird because I ended up in historical fantasy, which requires some research.
Right.
But I like when I can just make things up and like do things that you wouldn't find in the real world and like change history a little bit. So I can do that as well. Like that's just as fantasy as like dragons and everything. Like I feel like I guess it's an escape, but it's also a way to like rewrite history in favor of especially people of color. Like when you're black, you're like, that time of history was not great for us. So like my books take place in the late 1800s. So I'm like, you know what? Let's rewrite this and we can make it a cool place for black people. So yeah, fantasy is just it's just whatever you want it to be, you're not really restricted to any sort of you can like make it whatever you want. Like there's rules, but you can invent those rules, which I really love.
Wildblood was recently released this month. Can you talk a little bit more about the book?
Yes, Wildblood. Like I call it the book of my heart because I have Jamaican heritage, so I'm Jamaican American, and I really always wanted to write a book that was based on my heritage. So I was like, oh gosh, here's the moment I can do it based on like the folklore of my people. So I was very excited that I was able to do this. But Wild Blood is about a girl named Victoria. She's a wild blood, which is someone who has the ability to manipulate blood, and for their purposes, they turn it into weapons. So the wild bloods are kidnapped and sort of enslaved. They pay them a little so they don't call it slavery, but it's basically being enslaved by this touring company that takes tourists through this super dangerous, monster infested jungle. So Victoria is hired by this gold miner from America who wants to go deep into the jungle and mine some gold that he's heard about. And Victoria's looking to get a promotion. So she's like, I have to go on this trip. So they go on the trip, and it's not a good idea to go deep in the jungle. And she's been telling people that, but she's like, I'm trying to get my promotion. So let me do what I came to do. And on the trip, she falls in love with the gold miner. I had to add romance because, like, all I write in my books is basically like romance, like kissing, monsters, and blood. That's like have to be in my books, and then everything else can be different. But yeah, so it's about really, I mean, it's about this journey going through the jungle and the dangerous creatures there based on Jamaican folklore. But it's also about Victoria sort of coming into her own and like learning that to stand up for herself and like be true to herself.
And in terms of writing, was the writing process different, between these two books?
Oh, crazy different. Because first of all, within these wicked walls, I had more time, like more personal time. I wasn't on like a deadline. When I was first writing it, I wasn't on a deadline for a publisher that they needed it by a certain date in order to get everything else done that they needed to for the book. So I was writing, and then I got my agent. I revised with my agent, and then we got my publisher. So it felt like it was more of a casual writing experience. Whereas Wildblood, every single inch of it has been on deadline. So from the beginning of the idea to the drafting to the revision, it was everything was due by a certain date. And so it really changes the writing experience to be like on a deadline and like you have to get it in by this certain date. And it was fun, but like super stressful. I won't lie, it was kind of hellish, like trying to craft this story that I knew I wanted to tell like on this deadline. So gonna be honest, like I got the deadline pushed back a little bit. So um that's okay. That's always okay. I got it done. So but yeah, the book two, when the thing people say about book two is that it's harder to write than book one, they're not lying. Like I thought, oh yeah, no, I can get over that. That's fine. No, you can't. Like I wish you could, but yeah, book two is very much harder to write than book one, just because of those sort of time constraints and also the expectation. Because within this Wicked Walls did so well, like New York Times, Reese's Book Club, that I was like, okay, I have to live up to that at least. I have to get that, if not more. So I sort of had to like look myself in the mirror and say, hey, Lauren, don't worry about it. Like, take this pressure off. It was sort of just me putting pressure on myself, I think. I don't think anybody else cared, but I was like, wait a second, how am I going to do all that? Like, appear again. So I had to kind of take the pressure off myself. And after I did, writing got way easier.
For you, what's the hardest part when creating a book?
I think, um, like, describing things takes me longer to do. So I usually have the characters first. So I write my characters first and then um sort of like branch out from there. So the first draft is all about the characters, getting to know them. And then after that, I'm like, okay, now I can describe what these trees look like and everything. Like so the characters and their relationships and their personalities are like the top for me. And then um unfortunately, like I keep insisting on doing books with like action scenes, and like that's not my forte. So I don't know why I keep doing this myself. So those go over like a couple revisions to get those right because for some reason I keep doing this myself. Um, but yeah, the relationships and the romance and even the relationships between um like familial relationships are like the most important part to me.
And what do readers feel when they read your books?
I want them to enjoy it, first of all. Like, I would like that very much because I'm sure there are a lot of people who can relate to what I'm writing about. So, um, but also I'd like them to get like the deeper themes that I put in there, that like for Wildblood, I love in different forms was like one of the themes. So there's brotherly love, and there's like romantic love, and there's like lost love. So that, plus sort of like this emotional journey she's going on, and learning that like her anger is not a curse. It's like something that she can wield like for her benefit. And a lot of times in real life, we don't get to do that sort of thing. Like, um, yeah, especially girls, women, especially of color, don't really get to feel all the emotions they want to in public. It's like sort of seen as like something that's not wanted, or like that's not safe. And so expressing anger and everything, I just wanted to show that like it's not a bad thing. Like, you're allowed to feel human emotions because you are human. So you should be able to feel anything anyone else feels.
You are also a musician and enjoy playing the violin. How has music influenced your life and your writing?
Oh gosh, all like everything. Um, the music I listen to when I write, a lot of it will be classical music. Um, except like, you can't pick your favorite stuff because then you end up like just listening to it and like not writing. So, specific things made for the book. And then for Wild Blood, um, the love interest in the book, Thorn, he actually sings like 8 songs or so. And I don't know how I got away with this. Like, they were in the public domain. So it's like, it's not like they were songs that are copywritten or whatever. But yeah, I don't know how I got away with putting like 8 songs in the book. And so for me, for the inspiration, I went and actually arranged the songs in sheet music, and played them. So yeah, that was, I don't know how helpful it was for writing, but like it was helpful for me because like music is kind of part of my life. So yeah, arranging playlists, which I know everybody does, but a lot of classical music was involved with these playlists.
And to you, what does all of this mean, especially being able to share your voice through your books and also your culture?
Oh, it's so special. It is so special. That's why I kind of call Wildwood the book of my heart, because these are stories that before like 10 years ago, like you would never see these stories on the shelves. So it's super recent that BIPOC authors are really getting to like talk about their culture through their experience. And like I said, 10 years ago, who would have heard of a Jamaican fantasy novel? So I'm just so excited I get to talk about my culture like through my experience, but also like delve into like the folklore that I learned about when I was little, and really like sort of goth way that I really love. Like, gothic novels are like the thing for me. So the fact that I get to write them with my culture, and I don't have to like stick to like conventions of like all the books we grew up reading in school and everything, all the classics. That's just so special, so special. And I hope readers like see themselves in these books. I hope people are like, oh, wow, like there's a book about people who look like me with my culture. I get to read these. Like, we've never had books that we can look at and be like, oh, yeah, I can totally relate to this character because of the culture and everything. And it, I just think that's such a special thing because when I was growing up, forget it. There were no books about people who look like me.
So before we end, we have some rapid fire questions. The first question is, what is your favorite color?
Favorite color is blue, for sure. That was an easy one.
When are you the happiest?
I think when I'm writing, or when I'm drinking Pepsi, like either one.
What advice would you give your 18-year-old self?
Oh gosh, like I was sort of a little shy, like Victoria is in Wildblood. So I would just say, like, go for what you want. Don't hang back just because you're scared of going out and leading. You know, you can be a leader too.
If you could have three people, dead or alive, for dinner guests, who would they be?
For sure, like Princess Meghan Markle, and I would love Celine Dion. She's just so out there. Like I think that would be one of the most fun dinners ever. Um, oh gosh, it's too hard to think of um people who have passed. So I'm just gonna be like Michelle Obama. We'll go for that.
What is a book that you have recently read or are currently reading that you would recommend?
Okay, I have been recommending the same one for the past few weeks, and I'm never gonna stop until I find a better book. It's The Hacienda by Isabel Cañas. It's a gothic. It's not YA. It's adult, but it's a gothic. Well, I guess it's romance, but set in Mexico. So it's just, oh my gosh, it's fabulous. It's so creepy. Don't read it at night. It's so scary, but it's so amazing.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Lauren. We learned a lot about you. Thank you for taking your time out of your day to sit down with us and talk. Can you let everyone at home know about any upcoming projects and where they can connect with you?
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me. Oh my gosh, this was so much fun. So again, I'm Lauren Blackwood. My books, Within These Wicked Walls and Wild Blood, are out on shelves now. And at the moment, I can't talk about any future projects, but there will be some, hopefully, announcements soon for next year-ish. So I'm trying to give vague hints, like, because I can't really talk about it. But yeah, hopefully you will be hearing about those soon.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. It was really nice meeting you. Thank you.
Thank you.
You too. Thank you so much for having me.
Did you enjoy this episode? I'm sure you did. Don't forget to follow us on our social medias on Facebook and Instagram at MyGlendaleLAC.
And don't forget to follow us on Spotify or Apple or anywhere where you get your podcast from at G.E.N Talks. Also, make sure to give us a like and subscribe to the YouTube channel Glendale Library Arts and Culture, where we post full episode videos every Friday at 4:30.